Hey guys, and welcome to this workshop. So in this workshop, I'm going to share with you my own camera settings, plus the settings that you need to know when you're shooting in manual mode and everything around that. So we're going to cover things like what camera brand to buy, is there much difference, is there pros and cons? So I'm going to share with you my experience. Then we're going to talk about some lighting based on your camera settings and why you need to know your camera settings for lighting. And should you be using manual or auto settings when you're starting out as a photographer? All right, so let's talk about firstly camera brands, because I think when you're starting off or you're looking to invest in a camera, a lot of common questions will come up like, what brand do I actually go out and purchase? To be honest, and I'm pretty sure every photographer will tell you this, there is no right or better brand. I know a photographer who's a great friend of mine. She's been shooting for years and she uses a Sony. So Sonys are good, but a common to amongst photographers, well, in the, obviously in general, and those that I know in the newborn industry, is obviously Canon and Nikon. So I personally use a Canon. I started off with a Canon, and usually, like if you're deciding between Photoshop and Lightroom, you tend to stick to one and you try and avoid learning the other. So I've got a Canon, so I know this is probably not what you were expecting, but the short answer is it doesn't really matter what camera brand you have as long as it does the job. The long answer is you can do your research and compare the pros and cons. If you're that type of person that really wants to focus on what brand to get, what's the best, then I do your research, your own research. But honestly, it really doesn't matter. But I would say once you just keep in mind that most likely once you stick to one brand, you will tend to use that brand for the lifetime of being a photographer. All right, so let's go to the next bit. So what model? So now that you've got a brand, so let's just say we went for Canon and you're starting off and you're like, okay, what model do I actually buy? Do I buy the latest? Do I buy, a crop, a full frame camera? What kind of model? My suggestion to you is don't ask online because you get a lot of mixed messages. I would go into your local camera store, speak to someone that understands cameras well and that knows what kind of photography you want to do. Decide on the brand. Once you decide on the brand, then decide on the model. I would not go for a really old model. I would stick to a full frame camera because you get more out of it. It's more advanced. It shoots better. Obviously, you have more space in what you want to do with your images. So if you can start with a full frame camera, which that aren't very expensive, and with the model, I would, if you have enough money to invest in, go the latest one, because that will, every year something new comes out. So if you go the latest, that will last you for the next 10 years. If you don't and you're on a budget, go the model down from the latest, say the Canon. Now everyone's raving about, at the time of this recording, the Canon R6. Before I move overseas, I plan to get it. But I currently use a Canon 6D, which I got back then when the 5Ds were creating a big hype. I didn't have a budget, so I bought the 6D, which is a full frame camera, a Canon 6D, and I still use it. And it's great, and you've seen my work, it's doing a great job. So it doesn't mean I need to upgrade every year. Now, when you start to get into the industry and see other photographers, you tend to get into the shiny syndrome mode. Like when you see a new prop, you want it. Try not get into that with a camera because it can be really costly, and you want to focus about creating nice images enough to make you money, so later on you can update your camera whenever you want. So try and choose the updated model. If you can't afford it, go a model down from that year or the second one down. So but I would suggest, so whatever you can afford just to get you started. But if you're in this for a long run, yes, either the latest or the 2 models down is enough. something that will do the job. Okay, like I said, I still currently shoot with my 6D. It's a full frame Canon camera. I use a 24 to 105 millimeter lens. It is beautiful lens. I love it. I'm getting it with my R6, and that's what I'm used to shooting. You know, they say don't fix what's not broken. Exactly that. So even now, 10 years down the track, I'm going to upgrade my camera. You don't really need to upgrade. I didn't really need to go into the hype of the 5D Mark III and get that like everyone else was. Focused on growing my business and use that money towards my business instead. So that goes to show you don't need to upgrade your camera always, but when you are buying the first one, try, if you can, invest in a little bit more. So either the latest or 2 models down. And invest in a good lens as well. So my lens came with the camera and they said to me, no, you'll need another lens. I bought a 50mm lens. I hardly use it. It's just rusting in my cupboard. So I use that lens and I plan to get that lens for the new camera as well. Okay, so let's talk about, now that you got your camera, let's talk about the shooting mode. Do we use auto or do we use it manual? Now, as a professional, I'm going to tell you, scrap the manual and start learning auto. There is so much free videos, and I pretty much can teach you in a few steps here today what manual is. It's just understanding your camera settings, and we'll go in depth in that in the next slide. Automatic is when you put your settings on your DSLR to auto, the camera will be on like default, so it will automatically snap the photo for you based on the shutter speed, the aperture, the ISO, etc. So it's like having a phone and customizing it to suit you. That's what manual mode is. Automatic is like having your phone and telling it to adjust the apps, like when you buy an iPhone, there's standard apps that come with it and they're all placed side by side as a default. Once you have your phone and you say put it in manual mode, you're designing it how you want. It's exactly the same when shooting in manual mode. You can adjust, you're in control of the shutter speed, the ISO, the aperture, the the white balance, everything. So you can control it in all your settings. You actually control it. So if you are looking to become a professional photographer, or if you're shooting for clients, please stop using manual mode and start using, please stop using auto mode and start using manual mode. Definitely manual mode. All right, so camera settings. Now, let me say something. I really, really, really dislike it when people ask me all the time, everywhere I am on social media, what are your settings for that shot? It doesn't really matter, does it? I don't understand the purpose around that, because my settings change all the time. In one session, it can change 3 times, depending on the light that I've got. Now, if you're using flash photography or continuous light, it's usually the same. It doesn't differ much. But if you're using natural light, you'll find that you need to always change your camera settings. So my settings could be different to your settings depending on the space, the amount of light that's coming in, and all that stuff. So again, as the dot points say, no settings are ever the same. It depends always on your space, the light that's hitting your lens, etc. And for me, it depends on the time of day. All right, so that is why camera settings can differ from one person to the other. Now, my camera settings are usually at a particular sort of range, and I'll show you in a minute. And I always adjust them during sessions, like always. Now, this time, I just took a quick iPhone picture of my dirty camera at the back of it, just to show you currently what the last session I had, what my camera settings were. Now you can see there, M stands for manual mode. It was 1/250 for the shutter speed. The aperture was 4.8 and my ISO was 800. Now that's quite high. I usually shoot in mine, but I remember last session it was a bit dim in the studio because it was raining and overcast and it was really cloudy. The sun wasn't out. So I usually lift it to that, but I wouldn't lift it more. It just brings in more light and it makes the images more grainy. So, but usually The shutter speed is around that much, and the aperture as well. And I'm on auto white balance. You can change that if you want to. I've just left it there. It works for me, and I'm shooting raw. As you can see down there, it's shooting raw. So that's currently my camera settings, but it changes all the time. And then what I've done is I've put a light graph like you will see in the PDF that we've attached to this workshop. That PDF is Understanding Natural Light. That was an actual coaching video I did. You'll find it in the members area, but I've downloaded the PDF with the slides so you can understand it, and it goes into depth about the aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO. So I've got a new slide from it just to show you where my settings that are marked in red sit on the graph. So this is a good way to look at it, visually look at it and understand it. So you can see the aperture is f4, which means the subject in the foreground is focused, the background is blurry. Usually I have it, anywhere around there, maybe f5.6. I might even have it for 2.8. And that depends on the lens that you're using as well. So keep that in mind. Like mine's a zoom lens, so I can get more depth of field and more blurriness in the background. The shutter speed sits around there, and my ISO sits around there. Okay, so that's pretty much my camera settings, and understanding where it sort of sits at. Like I said, that PDF, download it, should be below this video, and read through it. It explains every section of this clearly, so it's all written there for you. You can actually have a look at it and see. But pretty much that's all you pretty much need to know. You need to buy a camera that does the job, that have a good lens. Most cameras come with a lens kit. Start with that and learn with that, and then you can go invest in more lenses and your camera settings. So through the workshop, you'll see that I will go through, how I shoot, what about the lighting and all that stuff. So that's it for my camera settings. And yeah, so like I said, that PDF is with the workshop. You can download it, and it goes over the natural light exactly. It talks more about the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed as well. So let's talk about lighting in the space that you shoot. So most of you guys know that my studio was a garage, and I've converted it into a studio, and that I use my window or my door entrance, I should say, for light source. So it's really different in every space. That's why for your space, you have to get used to the lighting and understand, from what side it comes in, what side you shoot, and things like that. So if you have a window like this, obviously, I get a lot of light. So the best time to shoot is between the early hours of the mornings, let's just say from 9 a.m. till about 1 p.m. After 1 p.m., especially on the summer days, it gets really hard and intense that we have to filter the light. Even sometimes I get Jess to stand with a blanket to block out the light because there's so much light enough around for us to use. So understanding the time from when you want to shoot. So when's the best time to shoot? Now, obviously I'm a natural light photographer, and I get clients that say to me, oh, can I come in at 5 o'clock? That is such a wrong time to shoot. There's a lot of shadows, a lot of, it's very overcast, especially on winter days. So I only shoot up to 2 o'clock max. So that's the timing that I shoot. So it's really important that you understand the timing that's best to shoot in your studio. Next, it's a good idea to understand where you want the light to come in from on your subject. So in this regards, a newborn. So do you want the light to come in from the left or the right? So in my case, I usually shoot this way. So the light will come on the left side of my baby's face. Sometimes I will shoot the other way. So I am starting to teach myself to shoot facing my clients sitting down rather than having my back to my clients. First of all, so I'm not being rude. Second of all, I don't know, I've just made it a habit to always shoot this way. And the reason why I'm sticking to this way is so my images create a nice flow to them. So I'm more identified by the way the light comes in as well. So you've got to keep that in mind how you shoot. So you can't shoot this way because the light is coming directly from behind, and you can't shoot this way because then you're blocking the light as well. So I like to shoot either facing this way or facing backwards that way. And I usually do shoot this way. I find it's just the way I've always shot, and my images always have light coming in from the left side of the face rather than the right. I am slowly changing it, just so I'm always facing my clients and my clients can see what I'm doing. And sometimes when I make a decision as to which way I want to shoot for the light direction, it depends on my baby. So my baby could be posed with their head this way, so towards the light. So that way I would shoot standing this way because the baby's head is here. I'm shooting this way. If the baby's head's here, the light is going to come up the nose that way. So that's another thing that I consider is where the baby is positioned in the prop, which light. So a rule of thumb is to keep the light, keep the baby's head close to the light, the side of where your light's coming from. Hope that makes sense. So where the baby's head is, I make sure the baby's head is closer to my light. So if the baby is posed with their head on this side of the prop, I'll just turn around and then the baby's head's here and I'm shooting this way. All right, so you'll see some images pop up so I can explain and show you. And that's a really good idea when shooting, understanding, creating a nice workflow of your images as to where the light is coming in on the baby's face. All right, I'm going to show you some images next, explain to you at what setting each image was shot. So in this situation with natural light. Now it can be different for continuous light or flash photography, but for me, I've only learnt natural light, so that's what I'm going to teach you. Okay, so here we have the few images that I've shot. So I've just darkened these two because they're not relevant. So I want to go and start with this image. So this image, if you can see up there in Camera Raw in the top right corner, looking at the screen, it says your camera, or usually will tell you your camera settings. So you'll see there it says ISO 800. Now, like I said, I usually shoot around 4 to maximum 800 depending on how much light is coming in. Just be careful when you lift your ISO, the image becomes a little bit more grainier, so you want to focus on opening your shutter instead. So I usually shoot around 4, maximum 800 in my studio. That's my lens. I'm shooting at 28mm. The f-stop is f4 and 1/250. Okay, so my shutter is 1/250. Now this is a little bit overexposed, especially for the colors I'm using, and that's another thing you got to keep into consideration is the colors you're using. Some colors, a lot of light bounces off it. Sometimes if they're darker colors, you want that moody style anyway. So it really depends what you're sort of after as well. That's why I say everyone's camera settings is different because you want to achieve different things. But this is in general what I'm teaching you. Okay, so the next one is also at 800, the ISO, same lens, and it's f4, but this one, the shutter is 1/200, so it's a little bit less, which is more brighter, as you can see, compared to the one that's 250. So you can see the difference there. Now the third one is at 800 as well, ISO, and as well it's at 1/2, so it's the same as well, which isn't relevant for me to show you, to be honest. And then if you have a look at this one, now around this setting, this is what I would usually use. My ISO is 400, especially with these bright colors. I don't want to lift my brightness of my ISO or my shutter because I don't want a lot of light bouncing off the whites in this image. So I've left it at 400 ISO and I'm shooting 1/320, okay, with an f-stop of 4. So this is the usual setting that I will use. Now the shutter speed changes all the time depending how much light I want to let in, but my ISO is usually around 400 to 600. And this one, the last one, is at 400 as well, f-stop 4 and 1/25. So just 125 over. So it's just literally a 5 over, sorry, this one's 320, this one's under. So I'm letting more light in again. So that's why I said I'll usually set my settings around this much. But again, depends on the colors I'm using, depends on the light that's let in, depends on, you know, the subject. Try not to leave your ISO too much. Like if you refer back, I've downloaded those slides that I was using to show you, so you can have them for reference, and the graph there will explain to you better visually when you have a look at it, as to when you lift your ISO, obviously you lose quality and it becomes more grainier as well. So I like to always keep my ISO low, so that way I have more information in my image. So that's an overall, just so you understand the differences. So the last thing I want to talk about is, now that you've understood your camera settings, your direction of your light, how to shoot when, understanding your settings when you're shooting your subject, being aware of where your light is coming in from, so you can create that continuous workflow and look of your images. I want to talk about creating a workflow, so a shooting workflow for you. So it's really enough to, understand your camera settings, and especially if you're the beginning stages of photography, trying to understand in the heat of the moment, changing your settings while shooting, having your client there. That's so much information to actually, work through with a real client. So understanding, having a workflow, and that becoming a habit of how you shoot during this session will make your life so much easier. So when you're shooting, it's a good idea to have a workflow of what you start with. So if you do beanbag poses, you might start with that, then you might move on to props. If you have siblings to shoot as well, I get that out of the way, I get the family shots out of the way, then I work with the newborn. So having a shot list, a shooting workflow is really, really important when you're working through it. So what I usually do is, when clients come in, I will, start the family shots, might start the sibling, if the sibling's nice and warmed up to me. We'll get that out of the way, because usually children, tend to have hardly any patience after 15 minutes to an hour. So we get that out of the way, we get the parent shots out of the way, the family shot, then we move on to just the newborn. So having that part of the workflow, understanding what you shoot first rather than guessing on the spot. Then after that, you need to think about, okay, what kind of shots I need to take, whichever setup you do, whether it beanbag or using props, understanding wide shots, medium shots, close-ups, extreme close-ups, angles. So if you have a workflow you work towards, I can guarantee your sessions will not only be faster, but fixing your settings on your camera would be much easier when you're doing it on the spot. The third thing when creating a shooting workflow is getting into the habit, when you're shooting this workflow, to look at the back of your camera. It is so important to do so. So when you are shooting during a session, everything takes time for it to become a habit, but you need to start doing this, because I've had so much photographers over the past, years I've been doing these tell me, oh my God, I didn't realize all my shots were blown out, or I underexposed or overexposed, and what am I going to do? How can I fix it? You can fix it, but it's not going to look as good. Or in some cases you can't fix it and you unfortunately have to reshoot. So making it a habit to shoot, look at the back of your camera, and then if it's not good, adjust it. Now what I like to do is, I like to take a test shot. So as we're settling the baby, say in a prop, I'll take a shot. So I make sure my exposure's good, my angle's good. Even if they've got the dummy in their mouth, that's an opportunity to take a test shot. Then once they're nice and calm, I'll grab, click, take a test shot. Now, lighting can change, so still make it a habit to look at the back of your camera really quick, flick through, and then you don't have to delete or do anything. Don't do that. Just flick through. Not good, I'll go there, adjust my settings, and take another shot until I'm happy with it. That will not only speed up your time and keep you in a safe place from overexposed shooting or underexposed shooting or burning out your images, it will also help you take the shots that you want to take and get you into the habit to shoot right out of camera. So that's what we mean when we say shooting right out of camera. So this has allowed me to shoot perfectly right out of my camera. in order for me to load the images for the client without even editing them. Now, I know you probably have done this before, like I have, hands up, that you have shot, say 50 images, probably more, and edited them all because you're so worried you can't show your clients with them raw, unedited. So now I have literally stopped doing that years ago, and I know so many photographers still do this: edit, shoot, then show your clients, and they end up selecting your smallest package with 10 images. You don't want to keep doing that. It's not sustainable. If you want to grow your business, it's not the way to go. So shoot right out of camera so you're so confident that you can load them. All I do is just any exposures that need to be changed, I do that in Camera Raw, then I load them for my client to select. Based on what they select, we retouch them. I do not edit all the images for them to view and purchase. I don't do that anymore. And if you are doing that, please stop doing that. Perfect your shots right out of camera. Even if you're using auto mode, try and do that. Perfect it right out of camera so you can show your client, get them to choose, then you can go and edit their images they've selected. All right, there you have it. I really hope you enjoyed this quick, straight to the point workshop all about my camera settings, how I shoot, my advice to you when shooting, understanding the lighting, creating a workflow, shooting right out of camera, understanding the manual settings, focusing on that. I highly suggest you do right after this workshop. Try and get over, creating that fear around using manual. It's hard switch, but if you keep doing that and trying using it and avoid using auto mode, then that's what's going to move you forward. Because if you stay where you are, you won't grow. And I really hope this has helped you. Remember, as always, come on over to the Facebook group, ask me questions there, and I'm happy to support you and answer them. And I know our community will be happy to support you as well. So if you have any questions, head on over to the Facebook group, put the hashtag My Camera Settings Workshop, and we can help you there.